Ever catch yourself, I don't know, maybe just daydreaming about the future?
Mm-hmm.
Like what the U.S. might actually look like decades down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Flying cars, Mars colonies, that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, buckle up because the future we're diving into today, it's a little less Jetsons and a lot more, well, dystopian is probably the word.
Okay.
We've got this, well, it's a story outline, really. And it envisions a future where, and this is wild, a future where the United States, as we know it at least, just ceases to exist.
It's definitely a thought-provoking scenario.
It really is.
And you're right, it really does tap into some of those, those deep-seated anxieties that a lot of us have, I think, about where the country's headed, where the world's headed, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing is, the real power in these kinds of stories, I don't think it's about, predicting some kind of doom and gloom.
Right.
It's more about using those what-if scenarios, thought experiments, really, to sort of examine what's shaping the present and maybe explore the potential consequences of, the choices that we're making today.
And this story, let me tell you, it wastes no time. It throws us right into the deep end. 2030. Just imagine a United States still trying to pick up the pieces from the 2024 election.
Oh, wow.
The results were, they were so close, so unbelievably contested, that Congress actually had to step in to make the final call.
Wow.
And that decision, let's just say it left the nation deeply, deeply divided. I mean, like on the verge, teetering.
Yeah, I can see that.
And as if all that political turmoil wasn't enough. Well, climate change is also happening, right?
Right.
Bearing down on us. Droughts, floods, you name it, extreme weather events. They're not just headlines anymore, though. They're the new normal.
It's almost like the world is ending.
It's intense. And that's where this story really takes off. You've got this backdrop of just, this instability politically, environmentally, and it's just there, right?
Yeah.
And those seeds of discontent, they start to grow fast.
I bet.
And the country, it begins to fracture. And not just any old fracture. It's along these, ideological lines. Even the states are aligning themselves with like-minded regions.
So it's like the cultural divides become geographical, too?
Exactly. And it gets worse.
Yeah.
We're talking mass migrations as people flee from, climate disasters, or they up and leave to find refuge in states that, are aligned with their values.
It's like everyone's trying to self-segregate.
It's wild, right?
Ah.
And you want to know the kicker?
What's that?
Alaska and Hawaii.
Yeah.
They're done. They say enough is enough, and they declare independence.
Wow. They just bail.
They bail. And it's funny, because, remember those anxieties we talked about in Brave New World?
Oh, yeah.
About the world control and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this story, it flips the script,
How so?
It's the continental U.S. that goes isolationist.
Oh, wow.
Turns inward, rejects international cooperation.
The U.S. becomes like its own little island.
Basically.
Yeah.
And you want to know the really ironic part?
What's that?
Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
They end up building walls to keep American migrants out.
Oh, wow. Talk about a role reversal.
Right. It's like, I don't know, it's like history repeating itself, but in this twisted way.
Yeah, definitely. It really makes you think about those, those familiar dystopian images we see, border walls, societal breakdown. But to see it framed in an American context like that, it's jarring. It really forces you to confront our own history with things like isolationism and, the cyclical nature of fear and exclusion.
Is that heady stuff?
It makes you wonder, are we really destined to keep repeating these patterns, or is there some way we can break free?
That is the question, isn't it? So now we're 40 years in the future?
Something like that, yeah. Those cracks in American society, they've really become more like gaping fissures at this point.
Yeah, we're talking 2040 to 2070. And this is where the story really starts to paint this picture of just how different, drastically different life has become in these fragmented states.
Right. It's not just a political division anymore. It's like completely different ways of life.
Yeah, it's like the country has been split into, I don't know, two totally different worlds almost.
In a way, it has.
On the one hand, you've got these technologically advanced societies, and they've really embraced this whole social engineering thing.
Yeah.
To create what they believe is, I don't know, like a utopia or something.
Yeah, I kind of engineered utopia.
So it's all about, stability, consumerism, happiness, that kind of thing.
Right, but it's very controlled.
Totally.
It's like they're trying to eliminate anything that might cause discomfort or or conflict.
Yeah. Perfectly curated lives, instant gratification. I mean, who knows? Maybe even like genetic engineering to get rid of all the,
Oh,
the
wow.
undesirable traits.
Yeah, like Brave New World brought to life.
Ex-
It really makes you think about the trade-offs we're willing to make for a sense of security.
It does. Because then on the other side, you've got states that, well, they completely rejected this whole, this high-tech controlled way of life.
Yeah, the complete opposite.
You're the folks who, like, went back to basics, right?
Exactly. They embraced traditional values, self-sufficiency.
Like living off the land.
Yeah, farming, rejecting mass consumerism, basically saying no thanks to the digital age.
Wow. It's like choosing between, I don't know, like the world state and the savage reservation.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It really is. If you were like suddenly dropped into this future, I mean, where do you think you'd feel more at home?
Oh, that's a tough one. It really makes you examine your own values and priorities.
Doesn't it?
It does.
And here's where I think this story takes another really interesting turn.
Oh.
Because resources,
Yeah.
they're dwindling. Climate change is, well, it's intensifying.
Yeah.
And all those ideological differences that once seemed, I don't know, maybe kind of abstract.
Right, like something you'd argue about on social media.
Exactly. Well, now they're matters of survival.
It's not just about different opinions anymore. It's about controlling access to essential resources, clean water, arable land, energy.
And that's when, I don't know, it really started to remind me of books like It Can't Happen Here, with like...
Yeah, where those resources, they become tools of control.
Exactly. And it made me think, it's a good reminder, that even the most, I don't know, like idealistic societies, they can still be vulnerable to the temptations of power, especially when things get, when they get desperate.
Absolutely. Scarcity and fear.
Yeah.
They can make people do things they never thought possible.
Okay, so we've got these two very different Americas, right? Each one grappling with its own stuff, its own challenges, and they seem pretty locked into their own worldviews.
Yeah, it's like two completely different planets almost.
It is. But there's this turn the story takes, and I gotta say, it really kind of snuck up on me. I mean, it introduces this whole new generation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they're coming of age after all this, the fracturing, the walls going up. I mean, literally and figuratively.
Sure, they've never known United States.
Exactly. And that's the point. They start asking questions.
Like what?
Well, they're curious about this before time, about history. And I mean, it's history that's either been erased entirely or like totally rewritten, depending on which side of this divide they're on.
Makes sense. So what do?
They start digging. I mean, literally digging.
Wow.
Unearthing old books, records, even like physical artifacts from before everything went down.
Trying to piece together their own version of the past.
Yeah. And as they kind of piece together these fragments, something happens.
So it's
They start to feel this connection.
to each other.
Yeah, like this sense of a shared history, It transcends all that, like the ideological stuff that divided their parents and their grandparents.
That's really interesting. And it reminds me a little bit of It Can't Happen Here. When Doremus Jessup, he goes from being like this passive observer to actively joining the resistance.
Oh, totally.
He realizes he can't just stand by and accept things the way they are.
And what's cool is how the story uses this shift, this whole generational thing, to show how powerful shared challenges can be.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, being curious about the past that's bringing these young people together.
What else?
It's climate change. I mean, they're dealing with rising sea levels, crazy weather, not enough resources, everything those in power failed to deal with.
So the very thing that tore the country apart is now bringing them back together.
It's kind of ironic, right? Because those threats, they're forcing this question. Can they really afford to hold on to the divisions of the past?
When their survival is on the line.
Exactly.
It's a powerful message.
And it brings us to the big question, doesn't it? I mean, does this fractured future, does it end with more fighting, more division?
Or is there a way back? A path towards, some kind of reunification?
That's what I want to know.
Well, the story, it actually leaves that open.
Really?
Yeah, which I think is one of the most compelling things about it. It doesn't give us easy answers,
Right.
or predictable outcomes. It's more like a challenge to think about what it would really take to bridge those differences,
To find some kind of common ground when everything seems impossible.
Exactly.
It's a question that feels, I don't know, like really relevant right now. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a time where things feel so polarized, not just in the US, but everywhere you look.
It's true.
It's easy to, I don't know, to just get overwhelmed by it, to fall into cynicism. But
Right.
this story, even though it's, it's dystopia in a lot of ways, it still has this little glimmer of hope.
Yeah, I see that.
It reminds us that even when things are, well, when things are really dark, people can still be incredibly resilient.
Hmm.
They can find ways to connect, even in the most unexpected places.
It's a good reminder that the future isn't set in stone. We're the ones creating it.
Hmm.
Through our choices, our actions, even just our willingness to talk to each other.
Absolutely. It's a conversation we need to be having.
It really is. Well, folks, that's another deep dive in the books. Remember, the future is unwritten. What story do you want to tell?